The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 3 days before anyone found it. The Serenity's Grace was not a warship. It carried no weapons larger than a standard emergency laser, and its crew had never fired even that. The ship belonged to the Medical Corps, and its purpose was simple: find the hurt, heal the hurt, move on. For 12 cycles, Chief Medic had served aboard the vessel, and she had treated everything from radiation burns to parasitic infections to the strange melting sickness that sometimes affected travelers who spent too long in hyperspace. She had never treated a hunter. She hoped she never would. The moon where the beacon originated was a gray and lifeless rock at the edge of a shipping lane. No atmosphere to speak of. No value to anyone. Just a place where damaged ships sometimes fell and waited to be found. Stood in the airlock with her team as the Serenity's Grace descended toward the crash site. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the wreckage below, a cargo hauler, mid-sized, broken almost in half. Debris scattered across the dusty surface in a long trail that told the story of a hard landing. "Life signs?" she asked. "One," said technician, checking his scanner. "Faint. The signal keeps flickering." "Species?" His face was covered in the soft blue fur common to all, but could still see him hesitate. His ears flattened against his skull. "Unknown," he said. "The scanner can't get a clear reading through the hull." Nodded. Unknown was not unusual. The galaxy held thousands of species, and the Serenity's Grace carried a medical database that struggled to keep up with them all. She would find out what they were dealing with when they got inside. "Standard procedure," she announced to her team. "Two-person entry, full protective gear. You're with me. The rest of you maintain position at the airlock. If I call for extraction, you pull us out immediately." "Understood, Chief Medic." The human stepped forward. Had almost forgotten he was there. Was a consultant, brought aboard 6 months ago by the Medical Corps administration to advise on matters. He was quiet. He kept to himself. In experience, he spent most of his time reading old research papers and drinking a brown liquid he called coffee. She had no idea why he was standing in her airlock wearing a surface suit. "I'd like to accompany the entry team," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. Had noticed that about humans before. They could be surprisingly quiet when they wanted to be. "This is a medical operation," she said. "You're a researcher." "I might be able to help identify the survivor," said. "If the scanner can't read the species through the hull, we might need visual confirmation before we know how to treat them." Considered this. She didn't like bringing non-medical personnel into uncertain situations, but the human had a point. The last thing she needed was to stabilize a patient using the wrong protocols because she guessed wrong about their biology. "Fine," she said, "but you follow my orders. If I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood?" "Understood." The surface of the moon was silent. There was no air to carry sound, no wind to stir the gray dust, and her team moved through the wreckage field in heavy magnetic boots, their lights cutting through the darkness. The cargo hauler's hull was torn open near the rear. Someone had already cut through from the inside. An escape attempt, maybe, or just the desperate act of a survivor looking for help. Shined her light into the gap and saw nothing but darkness and twisted metal. "Life sign is still present," reported, checking his scanner. "Ahead maybe 30 meters. It's not moving." They entered the ship. The interior was destroyed. Crates had broken open and spilled their contents across the floor. Personal belongings lay scattered everywhere, clothing, tools with cracked screens. Saw scorch marks on the walls and ceiling. Fire, maybe, or an explosion. And then she saw the blood. It was dark and thick, almost purple in color. It covered the floor in pools and smears. It painted the walls in long streaks as if something had been dragged, or as if something had been running. Chief Medic whispered, his voice was tight with fear. "I think we should leave." Didn't answer. She was staring at the claw marks. They were deep, deep enough to tear through metal panels like they were made of paper. The gouges ran along the walls in parallel lines, spaced exactly the width of a hand. Something with claws, something large. "The life sign," she said quietly. "Is it the survivor, or is it what killed the crew?" "I don't know," admitted. "I can't tell." They found the creature in what used to be the cargo bay. It was pressed into a corner, surrounded by broken crates and scattered debris. Its body was dark, almost black, and covered in a hard shell that gleamed faintly in the light. 6 limbs, 4 for walking, 2 that ended in claws longer than its forearm. A head with no visible eyes, just a smooth dome covered in small sensory pits, and a mouth full of teeth that looked like they could bite through bone. The creature's shell was cracked in several places. Dark fluid seeped from the wounds, the same purple blood that covered the cargo bay. One of its walking limbs was bent at a wrong angle. It was hurt, badly. But none of that mattered, because covering the creature's entire body, pulsing in waves of angry red and orange, were the threat patterns, bioluminescent warnings that flashed across its shell like fire. A message that needed no translation, that every species in the galaxy understood on an instinctive level. "Stay away, come closer and I will kill you." His body went cold. She breathed, made a sound like he was choking. His scanner slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. Hunters, the apex predators of the expanse, creatures that hunted for sport, for food, for reasons that no other species had ever understood. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't negotiate. In 1,000 years of galactic history, no one had ever successfully communicated with a hunter. They were kill on sight in most systems. The standing order was simple: if you see one, run. If you can't run, fight. If you can't fight, die quickly. "Back away," said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Slowly, don't make any sudden movements." But the human wasn't moving. Stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on He wasn't running, he wasn't screaming, he was just watching. "Hissed, move now." The human didn't respond. He took a slow step forward. Grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? That thing will kill you." "Look at its secondary eyes," said quietly. "It's what?" "The small ones, along the sides of its head below the sensory pits. Most people don't notice them." Forced herself to look. She didn't want to. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to get as far away from this creature as possible. But she looked. And she saw them, small, almost hidden. 24 tiny eyes arranged in rows along the sides of this head. They weren't looking at her. They weren't tracking her movements. They were darting back and forth, rapidly, frantically. "What does that mean?" she asked. Crouched down slowly, making himself smaller. His movements were careful and deliberate. "I've spent 10 years studying xenobiology," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Predator species, hunting behavior, threat displays. I've seen a lot of creatures that other people thought were monsters." The threat patterns flickered, just for a moment. The angry reds and oranges faded slightly, then flared back up. "Most predators," continued, "have 2 types of threat displays: active and defensive. Active displays are for hunting. They're designed to freeze prey, to overwhelm them with fear. Defensive displays are different. They're for when the predator is the one who's afraid." Stared at him. "You're saying that thing is afraid of us?" "Look at it, Chief Medic. Really look at it. It's wounded, it's cornered, it's alone. Its patterns aren't stable, they keep flickering. That's not a hunter looking for prey. That's an animal backed into a corner with nowhere to go." They made a sound, low, rumbling, almost subsonic, felt it more than heard it. "It's warning us," said. "It's telling us to stay back, but it's not attacking. A hunting would have killed us the moment we entered the room. This one is waiting, it's scared. Even if you're right, it doesn't matter. That thing could kill all of us without breaking stride. We need to leave and call for military support." "And then what?" "They'll come here and kill it. because that's what we do with things that scare us. Turned to look at her, and something in his eyes made pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something softer, something almost sad. "Chief Medic," he said quietly, "you came here to help a survivor. There's a survivor right in front of you. Are you going to help it, or are you going to run?" Opened her mouth to answer, to tell him that this was insane, that they couldn't possibly help her, that it was too dangerous. But she couldn't make the words come out, because she kept looking at those tiny eyes, those small, darting, terrified eyes, and she kept thinking about what she would feel if she was wounded and alone on a dead moon, watching strange creatures approach her in the darkness. "It's only frightened," said, so softly she almost didn't hear him. In the corner of the cargo bay, the hunter pressed itself deeper into the shadows. Its threat patterns flickered and pulsed. Its claws scraped against the floor. And it waited to see what they would do. Part 2. The medical bay of the Serenity's Grace had never been so quiet. Stood at the central console, reviewing the scans they had taken before retreating from the crashed ship. Her hands were shaking. She told herself it was from the cold of the moon's surface, but she knew that was a lie. Around her, the rest of the medical team waited in tense silence. Sat in the corner, his fur still flat against his skull, his eyes wide and unfocused. The two junior medics, and kept glancing toward the airlock like they expected it to burst through at any moment. Only the human seemed calm. Sat at a small table near the window, a cup of his coffee in his hands. He stared out at the gray surface of the moon below, his expression thoughtful. "We need to report this to the regional authority," said finally. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, too loud, too sharp. "They'll send a response team, containment specialists, maybe military. And they'll kill it," said, not turning from the window. "It's a hunter, of course they'll kill it. That's standard protocol." Standard protocol for a threat. Is a wounded, frightened juvenile a threat? Slammed her hand on the console. The sound made everyone in the room jump. She said, her voice rising. "Do you understand what that means? Those things have killed thousands of people. Entire colonies wiped out. Ships torn apart. There are systems where parents tell their children stories about to keep them from misbehaving. They are the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy." Finally turned to look at her. His expression was calm, patient. "I know what they've done," he said. "I've read the reports. I've studied the footage. I've seen what happens when a hunting pack finds a populated area." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "I've also read reports about humans." Blinked. "What?" "My own species. Do you know how we're described in most galactic databases? Persistence predators, pack hunters. A species that conquered its home planet not through strength or speed, but through sheer endurance and the ability to organize into groups. We chased our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We drove entire species to extinction before we ever developed space travel." "That's different." "Is it? 1,000 years ago, if an alien species had landed on Earth and seen what we were capable of, they might have decided we were too dangerous to live. They might have killed us all before we had a chance to become anything else. Humans aren't. No, we learned. We changed. We found other ways to exist." Set his coffee down and stood up slowly. "But we only got that chance because someone somewhere decided to give us one." Wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was completely different, that a wounded was still and would always be a danger. But something about his words made her hesitate. She thought about the creatures she had treated over her years as a medic. The frightened ones, the aggressive ones, the ones that lashed out because they didn't understand they were being helped. She had never given up on any of them. She had always believed that healing was worth the risk. When had she stopped believing that? "What are you suggesting?" she asked quietly. Walked to the console and pulled up the scans they had taken. The images showed this body in detail: the cracked shell, the bent limb, the internal bleeding that would kill it within days if left untreated. "I'm suggesting we treat our patient," he said. The words hung in the air, made a small choking sound, and exchanged worried glances. "That's impossible," said. "We can't get close enough to treat it. The moment we approach, it will attack. It didn't attack us before. It was too weak to attack. If we go back now, if we try to touch it to restrain it for treatment, then we don't restrain it." Stared at him, what? Turned to face her directly. His eyes were serious, steady. "Chief Medic, I've spent my career studying predator behavior. Do you know what I've learned? Most predators don't want to fight. Fighting is expensive. It costs energy, risks injury. A successful predator is one that chooses its battles carefully. Hunt for sport. Adult hunt for sport, in packs with backup," pointed to the scan. "This one is young, alone, injured. It's not a hunter, it's a scared child." Shook her head slowly. "Even if that's true, how do you expect to treat it without getting killed?" "I'll go first, alone, unarmed. I'll make it understand that I'm not a threat." "That's suicide." "Maybe," smiled slightly, a small, sad expression. "But it's the only chance that creature has, and I think it might be our only chance too." "What do you mean?" "The galaxy has been afraid of for 1,000 years. We've killed them on sight, refused to communicate with them, treated them as nothing but monsters. And they've responded the way any cornered animal responds, with violence, with fear." He paused. "What if we're wrong? What if we've been wrong the whole time? What if they're just as afraid of us as we are of them?" Opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She thought about the creature in the cargo bay, the flickering threat patterns, the darting eyes, the way it had pressed itself into the corner like it was trying to disappear. She thought about what it said, "It's only frightened." "This is insane," she said finally. "Probably. If you die, I'm not responsible." "Understood." "And if it works, if by some miracle it actually works, how are we supposed to treat a patient that won't let us near it?" Picked up his coffee cup and took one last sip before setting it down. "Leave that part to me," he said. The airlock cycled open and stepped out onto the surface of the moon, alone. Watched from the ship's observation deck, her hands pressed flat against the glass. She had ordered the rest of the crew to remain on board with the engines running. If something went wrong, they could be airborne in seconds. But she couldn't leave entirely. She had to watch. She had to know. Walked slowly across the debris field toward the crashed ship. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. He carried nothing, no medical equipment, no weapons, not even a scanner, just his surface suit and his oxygen supply. The gap in the cargo hauler's hull loomed ahead, dark and threatening. He entered. The minutes stretched out like hours. Stared at the gap in the hull, waiting for movement, for sound, for anything that would tell her what was happening inside. 10 minutes passed. 20. 30. Her comm unit crackled. "Chief Medic's voice was calm, quiet. "Are you?" "I'm fine, the patient is stable. We've reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" There was a pause. In the background could hear something, a low, rumbling sound, almost like breathing. "I showed it I wasn't a threat," said. "I sat down, I ate some food, I didn't look at it directly, I didn't move toward it, I just existed in the same space, let it get used to me. And it worked. It's not attacking me, that's a start." Another pause. "Chief Medic, I need you to bring medical supplies. Basic wound care, fluid replacement, antibiotics suitable for silicon-based biology. Leave them at the entrance to the cargo bay. Don't approach. Don't make eye contact, just leave them and go." "You want me to bring supplies to I want you to help me save a life." Closed her eyes. Every instinct she had screamed that this was wrong, that she was putting herself and her crew in danger, that no good could come from helping a creature like this. But another voice, quieter, older, reminded her why she had become a medic in the first place. Because everyone deserves help. Because healing is always worth the risk. "I'll be there in 10 minutes," she said. When she reached the cargo bay, she found sitting cross-legged on the floor about 3 meters from the creature's threat patterns had dimmed to a faint, unsteady pulse. Its secondary eyes were still darting, but more slowly now, less frantically. It was watching, and was watching it back. Not starring, not challenging, just looking, calm, patient. Set the medical supplies down at the entrance and backed away slowly. The patterns flickered slightly as she moved, but it didn't attack. It didn't even raise its claws. Over the next several hours, she watched through the hull gap as worked. He moved slowly, impossibly slowly. Every action was telegraphed minutes in advance. When he reached for a bandage, he first looked at his hand, then looked at the bandage, then moved his hand toward it inch by inch. When he approached he shuffled forward on his knees, stopping every few centimeters to wait. The creature flinched at first. Its patterns flared, its claws twitched. But didn't react. He didn't run. He didn't freeze. He just waited, patient and still, until the calm down again. By the time night fell on the moon, an arbitrary distinction, since the surface was always dark, had managed to clean and bandage 3 of the creature's wounds. That had allowed him to touch it, had allowed him to help. When finally emerged from the ship, he looked exhausted. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But he was smiling. "It let me help," he said quietly. "Chief Medic, it let me help." Didn't know what to say. She had spent her entire career believing that some creatures were beyond help, that some things were simply too dangerous to save. But here was proof that she was wrong. "What now?" she asked. Looked back at the ship, at the dark gap where they waited. "Now we keep helping," he said, "for as long as it takes." Part 3. Word spread faster than light. Within a day, the Medical Corps administrators had been informed. Within 2 days, the story had leaked to the news networks. By the end of the week, every inhabited system in the sector was talking about the human who had walked unarmed into a den and walked out alive. Most people didn't believe it. Were monsters, everyone knew that. They killed without mercy, hunted without reason, destroyed without warning. The idea that one could be helped, could be reasoned with, was laughable, impossible. But the footage was hard to argue with. Had recorded everything, the approach, the waiting, the slow, patient process of building trust, the moment when had reached out and touched the creature's cracked shell and the had simply let him. The galaxy watched and wondered. The Serenity's grace remained in orbit around the moon. Its normal relief routes were suspended. Its crew, once eager to return to their regular duties, now found themselves involved in something none of them had ever imagined. They were caring for a hunter. Had insisted on moving the creature aboard the ship. It couldn't stay in the crashed hauler forever. The conditions were too harsh, the resources too limited. But convincing the to leave its shelter had taken 3 more days of patient work. In the end, it had followed him. That was the part that amazed the most. Not the bandages, not the medicine, not the careful treatment of injuries that should have been fatal. The part she couldn't stop thinking about was the image of walking slowly toward the Serenity's Grace airlock with a hunter limping behind him like a lost child following a parent. The creature had been terrified of the ship at first. Too many unfamiliar smells, too many strange sounds. It had pressed itself into a corner of the cargo bay they had converted into a temporary medical ward and refused to move for almost a full day. But had sat with it, talked to it even though it couldn't understand his words, brought it food, treated its wounds. Slowly, gradually, they had begun to relax. Its threat patterns, once constant and aggressive, now only flickered when strangers approached. Its secondary eyes, which had darted so frantically in fear, had settled into a calm, watchful state. It still flinched at sudden movements. It still made that low, rumbling sound when it was anxious. But it was healing, in body and suspected in mind. The regional authority arrived on the 8th day. Watched the official transport dock with the Serenity's grace from the observation deck. Beside her stood quietly, his arms crossed over his chest. "They're going to try to take it," he said. "I know. They'll say it's too dangerous, that we can't keep it aboard a medical ship, that it needs to be contained by specialists." "I know. Contained is a polite word for killed." Nodded slowly. She had been thinking about this for days, how to protect the creature they had saved, how to convince the authorities that it wasn't a threat. She hadn't found any good answers. "What do we do?" she asked. Was quiet for a long moment. "We tell the truth," he said finally, "and we hope it's enough." The delegation from the regional authority consisted of 3 officials: a tall diplomat with silver scales, a stocky security officer with 4 arms, and a human representative from the Galactic Council named Director Wells. They wanted to see the immediately. Led them to the cargo bay with walking beside her. The rest of the medical team followed at a distance, watching nervously. The door slid open. There was resting in the corner they had prepared for it, a nest of soft blankets and cushions that had constructed over several days. Its wounds were bandaged, its broken limb splinted. Its threat patterns were dim and steady, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. When the door opened, its eyes focused on the newcomers. Its patterns flickered brighter. "Stay back," said quietly. "Don't make sudden movements, don't stare directly at it." The diplomat ignored him. She strode forward confidently, in hand. "This is the creature," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "The one from the reports." "Her name is," said. The diplomat turned to stare at him. "You named it." "She responds to it. Whether she understands it as a name or just as a sound I make, I can't say. But she knows it's for her. It's a hunter, it doesn't need a name. She's a patient. All patients deserve dignity." The security officer moved forward, his 4 hands resting on the weapons at his belt. "We've received orders to transport the creature to a secure facility for study, once our specialists have evaluated it. She's not going anywhere." The words came from. She was as surprised to hear them as anyone else. The security officer turned to face her. "Chief Medic, this creature represents a significant threat. The regional authority cannot allow it to remain aboard a civilian vessel." "This is a medical ship," said. Her voice was steady now, stronger than she had expected. "And she is my patient. I will not release her to anyone who intends to harm her." "Chief Medic, you don't have the authority." "I have exactly the authority I need. Medical Corps protocols are clear. A patient under treatment cannot be removed from medical care without the consent of the attending physician. I am the attending physician. I do not consent." The room fell silent. The security officer's hands tightened on his weapons. The diplomat's silver scales rippled with irritation. Only the human representative, Director Wells, seemed thoughtful rather than angry. "Chief Medic," she said slowly, "you understand what you're doing. You're defying a direct order from the regional authority to protect a hunter." "I understand perfectly." "And you, Mr. Wells turned to. You're the one who made first contact, the one who convinced the creature to trust you. Do you really believe this thing is safe?" Stepped forward slowly, moving past the delegation toward the corner where rested. The patterns flickered as he approached, then dimmed again. She recognized him. She trusted him. He crouched beside her and rested one hand gently on her shell. "Director Wells," he said, "when you look at this creature, what do you see?" "I see a predator." "That's what everyone sees. That's what we've been taught to see for 1,000 years. Are monsters, they're dangerous, they can't be reasoned with." He paused, looking down at. "But when I look at her, I see something else. I see a survivor. I see someone who lost everything, her family, her home, her sense of safety. and who was left to die on a dead moon with nothing but fear to keep her company. Made a sound, low, rumbling, her patterns pulsed gently. I see someone who, when given a choice between violence and trust, chose trust, who let a stranger touch her wounds and clean them, who followed that stranger onto an alien ship because she believed, somewhere deep down, that he was trying to help her. Stood and faced the delegation. You want to know if she's safe. I can't promise you that. I can't promise you she'll never hurt anyone, that she'll never be afraid, that she'll never lash out in panic or confusion. But I can promise you this, she's capable of more than hunting. She's capable of trust. She's capable of learning. And if we give her a chance, a real chance, she might be capable of things we can't even imagine. Director Wells was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to the other delegates. We need to discuss this privately. They left the cargo bay. The door slid shut behind them. Let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, admitted. He sat down beside and leaned his back against her shell. The shifted slightly, adjusting her position to accommodate him. Do you think they'll listen? I don't know, but I had to try. Watched them together, the human and the hunter, two creatures who, by every rule of the galaxy, should have been enemies, who should have feared each other, fought each other, killed each other. But they didn't. They just existed, together in peace. The delegation returned an hour later. Director Wells stood at the front, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the diplomat looked displeased. The security officer looked thoughtful. We've reached a decision, Wells said. They will remain aboard the Serenity's Grace for continued medical treatment and observation. Mr. will serve as primary liaison and behavioral specialist. Chief Medic will maintain medical authority over the patient. Blinked, you're letting her stay. We're letting you try. Wells's expression softened slightly. The galaxy has been afraid of for a very long time, Chief Medic. Perhaps it's time we learn to be something else instead. She turned to. Mister, you asked me what I see when I look at this creature. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? What? I see a human, a species that looks at the universe's most terrifying creatures and asks, what are you afraid of? A species that responds to danger not with violence but with curiosity, with compassion. She smiled slightly. It's unsettling, honestly, but perhaps the galaxy needs more of that. She extended her hand, took it. Don't make me regret this, she said. I'll do my best. The delegation departed. The Serenity's Grace returned to its normal routes, though its crew now included one very unusual patient. Healed slowly over the following months, her wounds closed, her broken limb mended. Her threat patterns, once constant, now only appeared when she was genuinely startled or upset. She learned to recognize the crew members. She learned to anticipate visits. She learned, eventually, to understand a few simple words and gestures, not language exactly, but something close to it. One day, found in the cargo bay, sitting beside with a translator device in his hands. There was making sounds, low, rumbling, modulated in ways that seemed almost deliberate. She's trying to communicate, said without looking up. I'm trying to build a vocabulary. Is it working? Slowly, she has a lot to say. Sat down on the opposite side of the room, keeping her distance but staying close enough to watch. What's she saying? Listened for a moment, adjusting the translator settings. She says her clan was attacked, killed by creatures she calls the ones who take, poachers probably, hunting for trophies or research. He paused. She was the only survivor. She hid in a cargo ship. When it crashed, she thought she was going to die. And then we found her. And then we found her, looked up at, his eyes bright. She says she was afraid. She thought we would kill her like the others had killed her family, but we didn't. We helped. She doesn't understand why, but she's grateful. Made another sound, listened. She wants to know, he said slowly, if she can stay. Felt something catch in her throat. She looked at the creature they had rescued, the monster, the predator, the killer. She saw the healed wounds, the calm eyes, the gentle pulse of patterns that meant safety instead of threat. Tell her, said quietly, that she's welcome here for as long as she wants. Translated, listened. And then, for the first time since they had found her, her patterns shifted to something new. Not warning, not fear, something softer, something warmer. Didn't know what color trust was supposed to be in bioluminescence. But she thought it might look a lot like the gentle golden glow that spread across Shell in that moment, filling the cargo bay with light. Across the galaxy, the story continued to spread, not just of the human who had talked down a hunter, but of the ship that had given a monster a home, of the crew that had looked at something terrifying and seen something worth saving. And in systems where had once been shoot-on sight, some captains began to hesitate. Some officials began to ask questions. Some people began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong about monsters all along. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was a start. And on the Serenity's grace, sailing through the stars with a human and a hunter and a crew that had learned to see the universe in a new way, that start felt like enough.